I'm Edwin Wong, and I'm here with Franky D. Gonzalez. He's a Latino playwright based in Dallas. Appearances include the Lark, the Sundance Institute, Ojai Playwrights Conference, NNPN, Latinx Playwrights Circle, Great Plains Theater Conference, Goodman Theatre, UC Santa Barbara, and many others. Seasons Resident Playwright, core writer with the Playwrights Center and the Bishop's Arts Theater Center Playwright-in-Residence, Franky has also been the recipient of the Charles Rowan Beye New Play Commission, an MTC Sloan Commission, co-recipient of the MetLife Nuestras Voces Latino Playwriting Award, won the Crossroads Project Diverse Voices Playwriting Initiative Award, and the Judith Royer Award for Excellence in Playwriting. And now he takes the $10,200 that comes with being the winner of the 4th annual Risk Theater Modern Tragedy Playwriting Competition for his new play, That Must Be the Entrance to Heaven, or The Dawn Behind the Black Hole. And just before we dive in, here's the blurb on his new play. That Must Be the Entrance to Heaven explores the lives and struggles of 4 Latino boxers fighting to fulfill their dreams in the United States. Wagering their lives for their dreams, these boxers fight with everything their bodies and spirits will allow against destiny, society, and the all-consuming power of a black hole in an effort to win the world title and overcome the roles life has assigned to them. So, congratulations, Franky.
Thank you. It's I'm honored to have won this really amazing award. I have tried every year, so 4th time's the charm. Forget 3rd time; it's the 4th. That's the one. I'm really happy to have won this award. Thank you so very much to the committee, to everyone who was on the jury selection panel. It's my honor, really.
And thank you, Franky, for your perseverance in keeping going. I guess that must be a challenge. I apply to these awards sometimes too, and it's always tough. And it's always tough to wonder if one day you're gonna make it, or
Right.
like it's. But unless you keep going too, Franky, it's hard to know whether, or it's hard to know how close you actually were. And I think it's like that with a lot of boxers too, right? Because boxers have a lot of adversity, a lot of sacrifices.
Yeah.
And unless they keep going, they never know. So it's a great metaphor for boxing is a great metaphor for life. But
yeah,
let's start with like boxing. Like so how long have you? I seen your posts on social media. So you're a historian of boxing. How did you get into it?
It's really funny. It was actually through theater that I found boxing. I had found this actor who really wanted to do some kind of role that showcased his talents, and he was a former athlete. An injury essentially ended his career, and but he still wanted to show off that he had athletic ability. So I looked around, and the kind of text that began my foray into boxing was finding The Cliff of Time by Kobo Abe. It's a boxing play, a very short play about a man who he knows this is his last fight, and he's got to do everything he can to stay in the rankings. And if he loses this fight, it's going to be impossible to get back into the rankings. And he loses. It's a monologue. It's an entire monologue where we go through his entire fight, and he loses. And he talks about how everyone stands on the cliff of time, and how high we reach the mountain doesn't matter. We eventually fall, no matter what position we're in life. And in reading this play, I thought, okay, this is perfect for this guy. It shows off his talents. But I knew only a little bit about boxing at the time, only from the fights that they would put on, you know, with my family and or my friends that would be watching fights, whatever it may be. So I started really researching it and really seeing what kind of things that we could do physically and athletically for this actor. And I just really got hooked into it because in watching these fights, I ended up not really watching the fights as much as I was watching the corner and what was happening in the corner, those moments where you see a coach saying, "Do you believe in magic? You got to do this," and just like trying to motivate his boxer to fight, or a boxer that you can tell he's fighting for something much more than just a title. He wants something. And as I started researching different boxers, I started realizing there is an entire wealth of dramatic stories here. And since then, I just devoted myself to the study of boxing and boxers, and I've found that most of them have some of the most tragic tales that you can think of, and they were more than just guys who beat up on other guys or something like that. There was actually a lot more nuance to their struggles, to their situations, and yeah, that's really where I got into boxing. It was in trying to help an actor find a role that fit him, and from there it just spiraled in. And I since then have I get very, very obsessed. So once I hook onto something, I just really stick with it. And boxing has been that thing for me.
Now, that's yeah, you've given me so many things to think about. But the first thing that comes to mind, Frankie, is have you noticed during uh, you were saying that the most interesting sometimes is the dialogue between
Yeah,
the coach and the
yeah,
fighter in the corner between the rounds, which is
yeah,
that's totally true. And have you
yeah.
noticed during COVID, because a lot of the times when they're fighting in a packed stadium, you can't hear nothing. But
Yeah, yeah.
have you noticed, have you been watching these matches during the COVID era that have no people in the stadium and you can
Hmm.
actually hear the fighters talking their trash talk to themselves
Yeah.
and you can hear every word that the coaches are saying and
Hmm.
it puts the whole sport into um, a different light.
Yeah, no, it really does. That kind of silence in the professional ranks is not something that you hear often. It's one of those things that you more hear in like the amateur circuit. So for a lot of these boxers, especially those that didn't have amateur backgrounds, the silence actually was something that really changed things for them. And the coaches had to change their volume levels because they couldn't speak as loud as they would like, or else the other corner might hear the strategy and everything. So it really changed the dynamics for a lot of boxers. And I think that for many, that deeply affected them. There's some boxers that refused to fight at all throughout the entire pandemic because they knew without the crowd, without the audience, it wouldn't psych them up. And there really is something, I think, to energy that other people give to their boxers. And there is, watching some of these fights, I saw one where the man inexplicably brought his child to the fight, and he got knocked down and you could hear his daughter crying, um, and he looked over and he tried to reassure her that he was okay, and it was a much more intense experience in a way, because then all you have is yourself. You have no audience, you have nothing. And to me, that kind of silence in the ring more mirrors life than anything at all. And it must be a very, very surreal experience to go through that kind of silence. There's almost a that Nietzschean silence of God or something like that one must deal with. And is it because God is silent because he doesn't care, or is it because he's dead or something like that? You know, it's so fascinating. And to hear the coaching where it was a little quieter, or to see them like messing around with the masks and everything. Yeah, no, it was the COVID fights were an interesting period of boxing that I think hardcore historians will look at it and think about what does this mean? What does it what does it do to boxers to have that kind of isolation?
Yeah, and without giving away too much of the play, I
Yeah.
love how you worked in the dialogue a little there.
Hmm.
The coach reminding the fighter to remember to use the jab, because that's the one
Yeah.
thing that
Yeah.
that's the most fun. I think people that are into boxing will get a little laugh when they hear that, because the
Yeah.
jab is like the fundamental weapon
Yes.
that you
Yes.
start. It's the first thing they teach you. It's the
Yes.
thing you work on. But when you watch these big fights, it
Uh-huh.
seems that like even the professional fighters at the highest level, it seems that when they get into that big fight, they all forget how to use the jab.
Yep.
And you
Yep.
got that in you captured that in your play. The coach is
Yes.
like, hey, you gotta. So
Stick to the jab. Stick to the jab.
yeah.
It's funny because what is it? I think there's an old saying from a famous coach where he says you don't get paid for overtime. And at these highest levels, they realize if I don't get them out quickly, this could take forever and they'll win. I think there's a set of nerves that come that you forget the most fundamental thing, because it's not the power punch, it's not the highlight reel knockout, it's not the thing. So it is very, very fascinating to see how so many boxers seem to just throw away the jab for no reason. But it's often the ones that are able to maintain that stick and keep the jab that are able to find their way to victory oftentimes. It really is. You can tell a whole lot by who keeps to their fundamentals. You really can. And I think that's true in much of life, in any art form, craft, or anything. The fundamentals are so important. If you have that down, the rest will come.
So hey, okay. Talking about fundamentals and boxing
Uh-huh.
as a metaphor. So in playwriting, I
Uh-huh.
don't know. Is there like a fundamentals in writing plays that the playwright's trying to go for the knockout effect, but doesn't keep up the jab?
Yeah, yeah. I think there is. I do think there is that. I think um fundamentally, what a lot of playwrights I feel end up forgetting when it's that moment, when it's that time, is to write their truth. Um, to write a truth that is, without that, you really have lost everything. If you can't write from a place of honesty, it will ring false. There's that old saying, I'll know it when I see it, when it comes to things that are obscene. And I think it's the same with things that are truly artistic, when there's a kind of mastery to it. Unless you're telling a specific truth that is undeniably something that moves you, I don't know, there's this kind of like cardiac moment that happens when you feel, it's like, oh, I feel that this is true. That's when you know you've got it. But the thing is that people think that that is an emotional experience, and that it's something that they have to make up. But that is the one part, the one area where you can invent the rest of the play, but at its core, it has to come from a place of truth. And when you lose that, you lose most of everything. With the rest of the play, it falls apart. You just have to keep to your core, and that is to come at it from a place of personal truth. Truth is subjective, these days, especially these days. Who knows anything anymore? The way that the internet has warped all things, but if you maintain it, people will recognize it, and that's really the mastery there, that bears repeating. It's okay if it's not something beautiful and poetic. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? I love you can sometimes be just as effective as an entire freaking sonnet. Um, a simple I'm hurting sometimes does a lot more. I found that those simple lines do more than a giant explanation, of monologue with beautiful imagery. Sometimes in the play, I think one of the lines is, I don't think I'm gonna make it there. I think I'm too heavy. My soul's too heavy. I don't need to talk about the metaphysics of the soul to just say, I don't think I'm gonna make it. To know that for a boxer to say, I'm not gonna make it, that's deep. And that's really it. Yeah.
So yeah, no, I love that, and that's so true. It's a play has to convince the audience of its truth, but your play is also filled with with poetry. Some of these parts about there have been boxing plays like you mentioned at the beginning. I don't
Yeah.
know if I've eh, there's probably been stories about black holes, but I never seen boxing and black holes combined together. So we talked a little bit about boxing, and the other
Yeah.
central image of your your play is the black hole. Now, how did you get the idea of like are you into science fiction or science, or how did this come
You know,
about?
in science in particular, no. Actually, it was one of those things. There was an article that I saw, where I believe the headline was, um, there is a black hole out there that will erase your past and will give you unlimited futures. And I thought to myself, what the fuck does that mean? Okay, let's let what does unlimited futures mean? And then when I see um what the Rise from Nordstrom to Sitter Black Hole presents in terms of possibilities, where instead of an event horizon, there's this Cauchy zone where time and space meet and everything begins to collapse and determinism just disappears. And at that point, you have to survive everything that has gone into a black hole, will go into a black hole, and is going into a black hole at the same time in a mind bending forever and never scenario. And if you should get past that, you will avoid falling into the black hole and your past has disappeared and you could theoretically choose any future you want. And there's the old biblical saying, I think it was from the, I don't know, I don't recall if it was from the book of Matthew or if it was from one of the other evangels, where Christ says, you know, it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of the needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. To me, that level of difficulty cosmically, to be able to reach a place where your past no longer determines anything in terms of where you're going to go in terms of your future, to fight through all of that, to overcome all of that, that seemed like heaven to me. And when I was a kid, my mother, this is also something that I incorporated into the play. My mother would always talk about, you know, what if there's the black holes are actually a portal to another dimension, you know, all those, you know, wild conspiracies and everything. And to read that, it was like, oh my gosh, my mom might be right. There might actually be black holes that will take you to an idea, a conception of heaven. I don't necessarily think it's the Judeo-Christian Islamic version of heaven, but it's just a personal idea of it. And when I see how much you have to overcome in order to get to that reward, I can only think of the experience of other Latino men whom I grew up around, whether they were undocumented immigrants attempting to get a green card, whether they were a dad and a husband trying to raise his family out of poverty, but everything seems to be holding him back. Um, you know, whether it was trying to seek out, you know, glory, even though your body's not letting you reach those heights, whatever maybe you're trying to overcome your brother's shadow, those seem to me so difficult that it must be a personal black hole. And to overcome those things, it just for me the metaphor felt correct. And I had been obsessed with that black hole for many, many years. And when I got in the commission to write this play, it was kind of this weird, tremendous moving of pieces. I was able to incorporate the ideas of risk along with the image of this black hole, the theory of this black hole, along with Latino issues, not just immigration, but of socioeconomic status, of being unable to move forward with things, of always being compared to your elders, your ancestors, your predecessors, and they all just came together. My several different passions came together, and they made this play. So I'm not necessarily the biggest science guy, and I think even in the play, I say I don't really understand it, but apparently this thing can erase your past. And I think what is more moving than that, to really actually get a blank slate in life, to really actually have that eliminated and gone, and to choose your future. We have so very little control in anything in our lives, that to have that ultimate control, to finally map out what you want and then to get it, that's got to be heaven. And that's really where the title, everything kind of all crashed together at once, like in a black hole kind of scenario.
I love it. But so yeah, we can. That's fascinating, and we'll jump back to the honesty of the story and your experience with your community. Just
Mhm.
just after a short announcement from our sponsors.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, I've got this theater competition and I've written 2 books on risk. So this is the first book. It came out in 2019, and in this book I talk about uh, how life is full of low probability, high consequence events, and it's not what we think is going to happen that really affects our lives, because the brain, it just doesn't like to process chance very much. It likes to live in that deterministic world that it goes from
Yeah.
A to B to C. But in
Yeah.
this book, I lay out a theory of playwriting and of understanding drama that's based on risk. So the big example from this book was in Macbeth, where the big thing that happens is that Birnam Wood comes and then all is lost. And that's the fulcrum on, he takes on a little too much risk by killing the king, and then he sort of triggers these exciting low probability events. So this risk theater is and then I started up the competition to invite playwrights to play with it. And I envision risk theater as as sort of a brand of playwriting, or a brand of tragedy. So it's in its going into the 5th year now, and I think more people have heard of it now than in the beginning. And it's sort of a big experiment to see if risk works on stage. And it's going to be like a 30-year experiment to see if great plays like Franky's play is going to result from it. And then here's the second book. This came out this year in 2022. And what's interesting about this book is I look at some plays in depth with the risk model. There's Othello, Macbeth, even the novel, Thomas Hardy or Arthur Miller's All My Sons. And there's actual plays from previous years of the competition that are in here. So if you're interested in how playwrights are playing with risk, this is a great book. I love it. Ask your library to carry it. Okay, that was all of the promo. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no, it's great. They're great books. They're great books. They are. They are. To keep plugging the books a little bit more, when I read them, a lot clicked for me. Because to me, it almost comes to that old saying, you want to make God laugh, make a plan. It's very much that, and I relate so much to that model, because all around me, it has always been something like that. Just this one time, nothing's gonna go wrong. It's never gone wrong before, and then that's the one time it goes wrong. That's the stuff of drama. That's the stuff of tragedy. It's just an average everyday scenario until it's not. You start your day out, and then you end up. My life is basically risk theater. Not so much the tragedy still yet, thank God. But where I think, nothing, what could possibly go wrong? Next thing I know, I am in the middle of a tattoo parlor at 2 a.m. in the middle of Los Angeles, eating Thai food with this guy named Chrome and wondering about my life. How did I get here? I just wanted to go to see a play, that kind of thing. And so it really very much made sense to me. And so a lot of my plays do feature in some way that, or at least try to be in conversation with the risk model. And I think I finally hit it with this play specifically. I think I finally figured it out. There was one entry that I had that made semifinalists, where a brother and sister find out they might not be brother and sister, and after a lot of hesitation, they decide, you know what, I guess we love each other. And just as they're about to consummate, the sister reveals she actually lied, and the information that she gave was just to see if he felt the same way she did. And it blows everything up, even though they were so certain. It was so, but it didn't quite make it. And I was like, okay, I know why. Let me fix it and go on to the next one and the next one. So it's a really, really fun model, and I think that it presents a kind of template or a guide toward how you can find a way to make an interesting scenario play out. And I found that especially with the direction of one character in specific who he is not supposed to win his fight. He's just not supposed to win. And then dramatically, the most inopportune thing happens to the guy that's supposed to defeat him soundly. And it happens in boxing.
Oh, yeah.
What it really does, I've seen matches where a guy's Achilles ruptures right there in the middle of the ring, and it's like he was supposed to win a 20-1 odds favorite, and there he goes. It's happened so much where whether it's Vitaly Klitschko versus Vladimir Solis, David Haye versus Tony Bellew, 1 and 2 injuries forced David Haye to quit. Vyacheslav Glasgow versus Charles Martin. It's just so many different instances where it's like a freak catastrophic injury happens. Yeah.
I guess how that could tie into the risk theater model is that in the ring, you're taking maximum risk. And
yeah.
Like if you're taking minimum risk, nothing's gonna happen. But if you're taking maximum risk, you're saying to fate, come on, come at me. I'm right here. I'm taking maximum risk. I haven't kept any of the powder dry. If anything goes wrong, it's all it's all going out the
and that is where I wanted to take where it statistically this is Buster Douglas versus Mike Tyson. It's not supposed to happen. How could it possibly be? That's 60-1 odds. That's stupid. That's absolutely insane. No way it can happen until it does. And
that's what makes I want to transfer this over into theater because people talk about Buster Douglas and Mike Tyson. They talk about that fight because of just how impossible it was. And and with playing with risk on the stage, it hasn't happened yet, but I think slowly, when audiences find out about risk theater, they'll be like, I want to go see a risk theater play in the same way as they want to watch that Buster Douglas Mike Tyson fight because that's the fight that defied all the odds. And there's something that people intuitively or innately they're thrilled. And they'll line up at the box office and they'll
watch it. And they'll watch it again and again. It's the most interesting because I think that is the closest that we have to things like the David and Goliath scenario. It's the closest that we have to miracles. Is this low probability, high impact kind of. That wasn't supposed to, oh my God, did I just see that? That's the stuff that makes you hit loop on YouTube to watch it again. Or
maybe
record it.
It's the modern miracle that that this modern age will believe in are these weird
occurrences.
Well, going back to the theme of honesty and in playwriting, one thing I've noticed, I read Palates de Coco. That was a finalist a few years ago in the Risk Theater competition.
Yes.
And I've just been reading and making notes on your new play. And I think the word that I would use to describe them is that they're really courageous plays. And they're really courageous plays. I don't know your background, but it seems like you draw from your own life, and you talked about that a little bit earlier. And what I think of when I read your plays, Franky, is what it must have cost you to write them. I write little essays and. But the things that have happened in my life, or the stories of my friends, some of them, I don't really, I couldn't pay that price to be able to really talk about it. And I think there's the artists that are the artists that talk truest to life. I'm thinking about the American playwright Eugene O'Neill. His
Yeah.
last play, he drew from life with that absolute honesty, but he was
Yeah.
like, hey, you got to seal up this play for 10 years until after I'm dead, and then no
Yeah.
one can, like, I think that was Long Days.
Long days journey into night. Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Then I think about, like, there's been like Hemingway, he drew from
Mhm.
life. And I always think and I don't know if it's true, but when I read your plays, I think, like, my God, like like, I wonder if like what it's cost Frankie um to write that. Is that something that or does it just come naturally to you? Like
No, I find that my plays land usually in two camps, the ones that are deeply personal, and then the ones that there's just something lacking in them. With Paletas de Coco, and That Must Be the Entrance to Heaven, and another play that I've written that also made semifinals for Risk a few years back, Even Flowers Bloom in Hell Sometimes. Um, for me, I have to draw from a personal place in order to get the story out there. I feel that I don't like to call myself that, but I'm relentless in my pursuit of finding some theatrical truth, some personal truth, and displaying that for people to see on stage. And the only truth that I know is the truth of myself. These four boxers are not necessarily unique stories as much as they're my different hangups in life, all pitted against each other to see. And it's a large thought experiment to see which is the actual thing that is the most important to me. Is it my resentment of those who came before me, who've done greater things, who um, they I'm always compared to them. Being a Colombian American playwright, I'm always compared to Gabriel Garcia Marquez, and I'm asked, "Where's the magic realism? Where's this?" And um, I love Gabriel Garcia Marquez. He's one of my favorite writers to this day, and yet at the same time, there's this kind of gosh, I wish he'd go away sometimes because I'm just always so constantly compared to him. There's the wanting to show that you didn't pursue a dream in futility and to prove to people who doubted you, like a father, that you did the right thing. Um, and you have to make peace with the fact that maybe that will never happen. And so on and so forth, honoring your mother's sacrifices for the life that she gave up to have what you have now. That is my story. And then wanting to lift a wife and kid out of poverty. I mean, look, I'm an artist. Artists make no money whatsoever. So those have to come from that place. And to me, the cost of it is that there's the price is you really don't get too much of a social life. You really don't get too much of an ability um to really hide. A lot of people use art as a way to hide. I use it as a way to actually interrogate myself ruthlessly, and relentlessly. I'm using that word again, and make myself known to myself. Essentially, I'm interrogating myself whenever I try to write a play, and I'm asking questions about me. And I sometimes don't like what comes out of there. I sometimes don't like who I am, and I'll be honest about that. And that's in paletas, and that's in the boxing play as well. A lot of these boxers are like, I don't like myself, or the narrator in paletas is just like, I'm don't think I'm really that great of a dad. Um, and then the other thing I think that comes with that is there's a certain amount of loneliness. You can't talk to anyone about these kinds of things, not really. That's why
no
you
one
pursue art.
understands.
Exactly, yeah. You can't until you get it out there. I mean, it's imagine pitching this play to someone. Yeah, four boxers in a black hole, and they fight for the world title. What? What is that even? So it's like, you know what? Let me make it first, and then you can see it. Or something. It can be very, very um difficult. And so there's almost this kind of attempt to try to explain myself to everyone through my art. And the cost of that is that I really um, can never be seen other than by my art, through my art. Everything else is a mere facade, like Pirandello would assert in his plays, like Scarecrow's in Search of an Author. Yeah. It's,
So, like, yeah, the world is a more wonderful place. It's a bigger place with your art. That's for sure.
thank you.
And I think uh, the obvious question that comes to mind when you say that, Frankie, is like by putting your divided self into a dialogue or a drama with another, like what you came out with it. And the reason I asked this is there's I'm reading uh, a French writer right now, Albert Camus. So he wrote The Plague in 1947. And you know, like there was the disaster of all the wars, like France just got destroyed, and then and then he was born in Algeria, that was his homeland, and then the Algerian War of Independence was just around the corner. It was starting to happen, which just broke his heart. And then also there was like things going on in his own life. He had tuberculosis from when he was quite young, and in the early 40s, it spread from his healthy lung into his other lung. He thought he was gonna, so he was facing a lot of uncertainty. And in The Plague, the main characters, Dr. Ryu, Grand, like there's a journalist, Camus is a journalist. The Doctor chronicles uncertainty, that's what Camus does. Grand and Theroux, they're writers, they're looking for that word. So this is like Camus in dialogue with himself to like explore uncertainty in the same way as what you're saying, Frankie. You're using art to find your own solution. So the solution you found in like how to deal with uncertainty was that you just got to keep going. When as long as the music's playing, things can be absurd, but if the music playing, you got to keep going. So he found a solution. But this begs like the question from That Must Be the Entrance to Heaven, like putting your divided self into conversation. What came out of it? Like, did something come out that?
What came out was really what is most important to me. When I put these four very, very large chips on my shoulder up against each other, I realized that at the end of the day, my own struggles with being associated and identified as a Latino writer does not matter compared to my wife and child's well-being. Damn whatever the doubters, my father, whomever never gave a damn about me, think, my mother's sacrifice matters much more, and honoring her sacrifice and being called an artist and bearing that matters much more than getting the affirmation of you did the right thing doing the arts. No, my mom's believed in that, and she gave up everything for me to be an artist. And I'll be damned if I let any sacrifice, if I let anything make me stop my pursuit of art, except for, and that is the biggest thing, my wife and child needing to be fed. That's an eternal struggle. The pursuit of art is a pursuit of poverty, to be quite frank. You just don't make any money off of it. And I remember it was the worst, probably the worst day of my life. I had $17 in my account, and my infant son needed $40 for formula. We'd run out of formula. And we got this jar of pennies, and we were counting pennies. And we were in this situation because I'd self-produced a play. The play absolutely flopped. It didn't even break even. There was just, I was down so much money, and I was hoping to at least break even. And my wife turned to me, and she'd been very supportive of me up till then, but now we had a son. And she said, is this theater stuff really worth it? Is it really worth this? This is humiliating. We're counting coins to see if we can get to $40. And for me, the pursuit of art is to pursue something that honors what my mother gave up so that I could be an artist. She gave up a lot so that I can do writing. She's sacrificed so much. But is it something that I'm willing to sacrifice the life of a child who never asked for that in the first place. Not the life, but the well-being and the happiness, and also the well-being and happiness of my wife. And I find myself unable to answer that question because it's such a passionate desire to be an artist. It's something that I can't get out of me. And I could go to a corporate job. I do very well in corporate America. I did corporate America for a little bit as I was trying to raise up money. Um, but I felt like I was betraying what my mother had done and the hope that she'd put in me. And I know she would be like, "No, I'm still proud of you no matter what." It's just something in here. And I'm just unable to solve that answer as to which is more important. I was able to figure out the first two fights easily, but that last fight, that third fight, um, in the play, we don't really see who wins. We only see them fall into the black hole and go to that better tomorrow. So we don't know who wins. And in fact, in my conception of it, they had a split decision draw between the two of them. Um, but that is the biggest revelation that I had in that script, is that I just don't know how to answer walking away from the arts to maintain the well-being of my wife and son versus, letting that go a little towards the wayside and pursuing art full on, because I need to show that my mom did not use up her youth and her life and work 4 jobs and everything, raising 2 children by herself. So yeah, that's really it. Like I figured out more about my own hangups and more about my own self. And in its own tragic way, I'm left with more questions about, well, this is something that may come up and it might become, it might reach a head. What's going to happen, if I have to answer that question? And I think in a certain way, I very in a cowardly way, backed away from it and just plunged them into the black hole, and they both make it. But I'm still not sure in real life outside of the theatrical convention of the play, what I should do, and if that question is going to become a truly existential one in my life. It's simmering. It's always simmering, especially when you get close to that $17 again. I never want to reach that point in my life again, but it's always there. It's always something that bubbles under the surface.
Yeah, I think getting the story out there and the production next year, the way that you've gone through adversity is going to be an inspiration for a lot of people that have heard your story, and also for your family and for your son that's watching you go through this. Will teach him like such important lessons on what this thing called life is. Like it's I think a lot of people will. I think the play and your work and your story is going to reach out to a lot of people and that are going through something similar.
Yeah.
And it shows how we can get through this together, maybe.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I hope so. Playwriting ultimately for me is putting a note in a bottle and throwing it out to sea and desperately hoping that I'm going to get a response one day. It's my way of trying to communicate with people. It's my way of trying to express my worldview, and try to show what I've learned from others. You've mentioned actually 2 of my most favorite writers already, Camus and O'Neill. I think they are very much 2 writers that I go back to constantly when I'm thinking about how to approach writing plays or how to approach the deep questions. The Plague is one of my favorite novels. I'll never forget that moment where I think it was Grant is standing out in front of the shop and he's crying, remembering his wife who left him, and then he falls over of the plague, and it's just like, oh my gosh. And what is it? A loveless world is a dead world. That I think was the line that hit me. A loveless world and it is a dead world, and that's me. As I just want to be found, and what a wonderful thing to see this play be found by not just Urban Theater in Sarasota, but also by the Risk Theater Modern Tragedy competition, and by other people who've enjoyed the play thus far. It's such a wonderful thing, and it's a wonderful affirmation that perhaps I am doing the right thing in pursuing the art.
Yeah, this brings me to like, you talk about your work as being a message in the bottle. And I think this reminds me of, I always like reading about Customato.
Yeah.
So he was Mike Tyson. He found Mike Tyson and adopted him and trained him.
Mhm.
And uh, and one of the fighters and he taught Mike Tyson a lot of things. When he met Mike Tyson, he couldn't even read, but he had him
Yeah.
reading Nietzsche and
Yeah.
Thucydides and like
Mhm.
so. And one of the things, one of the boxers that they really followed back then was Jack Dempsey.
Mhm.
Now,
Mhm.
Jack Dempsey at that time, he was on top of the world. Everyone knew him. And what Customato, this is in the 80s, was saying to Tyson, he was like, "You follow me, Tyson, and Jack Dempsey, in a few years, unless you talk about him, no one's even gonna remember who he is." And then Mike Tyson was like, "Cuss, how could you're talking crazy talk? There's no way that unless I talk about Jack Dempsey, um,
Right.
because he's like so big, and I'm like, but I never knew Jack Dempsey. The only Dempsey I knew was like, I don't know if I'm in Canada. I don't know if this is in the States, is Dempsey's bread.
Uh-huh.
So it's a brand of bread we have up here. But it was because I started following Mike Tyson and
Yeah.
listening to what he was saying of the boxers of the past, that I know Jack Dempsey. And then I started
Yeah.
to get interested in Dempsey's story. But
Yeah.
to tie this back to you, Franky, like this is brilliant. This is the last page of your play. It
Yeah.
has the references, right?
Yeah.
It has the
Yeah.
references of, so the fight between Edgar and Manuel. They're like you liken it to the one to Gatti versus Mickey Ward
Yeah.
one. And like
Yeah.
this is a question I want to ask you. I'm getting to the
Mhm.
question. It takes me a little
Yeah.
while.
Yeah. No, no,
But
no, absolutely.
the question, Frankie, is like, do you think one day in 40 years, just like what Cuss and Tyson were talking in the 1980s, people of the future, they'll know your play, but they'll be like, "Oh, who is this Gatti guy? Mickey Ward. I
Uh-huh.
never heard of him. I gotta
Yeah.
like, do you think, can you imagine that happening?
I
That
mean, I think it's happening now, really, especially amongst theatrical people. They don't know too much about boxing, um, and they don't know there's a stigma, and that's why I did want to write about boxers. Really, is there's always a stigma against certain sects of people, even amongst um, minority classes. I don't like the word minority, um, but even amongst classes of people that are historically oppressed, there's some that are just they're no-go people, and so I have always been one that likes to look at inmates, or in this case, boxers who live in this kind of different fringe and different standard where you look at them and like, oh no, those guys, they're just brutes, they're savages, and yet you see all of these fights and I don't see brutes. I don't see savages. I see people who they're fighting to feed their kid. They are battling for just one more chance because they know they got it in them, and they're looking for something else. They're trying to obtain something that really only they can know, and they're trying to satisfy something that is way beyond just simple punches. It's more than that. And with all those fights, I tried really capturing um, those kinds of ideas. When you look at like say, Mickey Ward versus Gaddy, um, round nine. You say round nine to anyone that loves boxing, and they know immediately what that. I can't believe that round even exists. That the human body can go through that much for both of them. That they did what they did, or you see a Diego Corrales versus uh, Castillo. Oh my God, that round 10 is just like, what is happening? He got knocked down 3 times, and then he won. And then Corrales actually won against Castillo. Oh my God. So to me, this is almost I don't believe that you can go forward without being able to look at the past and honoring that kind of past and looking at tradition and saying, this is where the heart of a lot of the choreography that I envision comes from. And it's these moments that I saw in these matches, in these fights, that I saw humanity on display.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's like, and you capture that in your play so well, Frankie. I think
mhm,
in that Gatti Mickey Ward fight, there's
yeah,
this one moment that, like, Mickey Ward, he goes up top, and then it's
yeah,
that liver shot, right?
yeah.
He
Oh my gosh,
delivers
yes,
that liver shot, and you see like Ward hits him with it, and then you just see like a Gatti looking at him. He's like, "Man, like, dude, why you hit
yeah,
me so?" And then
yeah,
they pause. Like he doesn't
yeah,
even follow up. Gatti just looks
yeah.
at him for, I think it's a good 2 seconds,
Few
like with these
seconds, yeah,
eyes, and the
yeah,
whole fight. It just pauses as they look at each other. Like
yeah.
I can't even explain, but you know what I'm talking about,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely,
Like
absolutely,
just
and it
that look
says,
was
yeah,
just so human,
yeah,
but it's savage at the same time
yeah,
too, right?
exactly. But and to me that is ultimately why boxing is the one of the most human, if not the most human of sports, at least from the perspective of like cisgendered male, is because really that's what we're all doing. We're all fighting for this spot. We're all fighting for the one prize. And for a lot of athletes, second place is first loser. That's all that
Yeah.
means. And we're all struggling to obtain something that is more than ourselves, and we're trying to reach a little closer to that idea of immortality um, that defies the convention of this mortal coil. And it's moments like Gatti Ward that do that. It's moments like winning an award, and to say my name exists in this place among this exclusive group of people. Um, to say I am an artist and to be remembered beyond your own life, even when those who remembered you are gone, to be remembered in that way. But just like you said, that fight for immortality is very futile. It's like that Cliff of Time thing. Eventually, Jack Dempsey is not as well known, other than to
Yeah.
hardcore boxing historians. Mike Tyson is now the more well known one, and I imagine that perhaps in a few years, the one that'll be more known might be Tyson Fury, for all we know, or Alexander Usyk. Who can say?
Well,
Yeah,
yeah, no, I think the way it's gonna play out, like with your play, like I think
yeah,
it's hard to believe today, but there's a chance that
yeah,
like people they're not going to remember like Klitschko or Joshua, but
hmm,
because it's like the wonderful thing I like about plays, because I'm looking at it as I'm a bit of a scholar, so
uh-huh,
like I look at plays as, so I study like Sophocles and Aeschylus and
uh-huh,
Shakespeare, and what happens is I learn about what it was like to live in 1600s by reading Shakespeare. Like if Shakespeare
yeah,
wasn't around, I wouldn't know nothing about the 1600s. So they had,
yeah,
like, they were worried about lines of succession, and
hmm,
they were worried
hmm,
about wars. There was religious conflicts, and then in the ancient plays, they talk a lot about the meaning of power. Like, does absolute power
yeah,
absolutely corrupt? So, and the most interesting thing is, like, I'm looking for plays to enter the canon that
hmm,
that the people in the future can, like, look at your play, Frankie, and
yeah,
they'll be like the people in like 2400, like
yeah,
it'll happen one day. 2600, they'll be like, what were these people in the 21st century doing? But and then they'll
yeah,
have this as a message in the bottle is
yeah,
the words that you use. You're sending a message to the bottle to the future scholars, and then they'll be like, "Whoa, they had um, immigration was an issue in
hmm,
this era. They had people were living in poverty. There was like social inequalities in this. Like
yeah,
maybe in the future, they don't even have money anymore. They're like, "Whoa,
right,
we're living in this utopia," but
right,
and they won't even know what it was like to, but they'll have like a,
hmm,
a testimonial. Like,
Yeah.
do you see
Yeah,
this?
no,
Like, do you think about
absolutely.
this when you write?
Uh, Not generally, because one of the things that to me very, very much terrifies me is um, the opposite end of it, where it's still a problem, even in that time, and to see and to hear 400 years later, tragically, immigration is still an issue. Um, uh, Poverty is still rampant. We still have no vehicle by which we can live our dreams without having to sacrifice so very much to get to that place. That to me is one of the things that in my mind's eye really causes a shudder. I write about things that affect me and bother me, and I hope to God that 400 years from now, it's your scenario where people are looking at it and thinking, wow, they were really screwed up back then. Yeah, or that they see that there were certain evils that finally were eliminated. Um, but one of the things that always saddens me in reading something like a Shakespeare is how very, very applicable it is, virtually all his plays to now. And it's like we have not progressed too much technologically. We look different. We look different in terms of our mode of dress. Our lifespans might be expanded, and yet we are still repeating these same tragedies, even though they're so beautifully, beautifully spoken about, and the solutions to them are so beautifully laid out for us. Or at the very least, the don't do this if you're going to do something um, of it is laid out for us, and we still don't follow that. Um, that it still rings true is tragic. But what I think gives me some heartening for it is that what this will at the very least do, what survives always, is the arts. What will always survive is the arts, and they've been saying for 3,000 plus years the theater's dying. Theater's going to lose to this radio thing. Theater's going to lose to television. Theater's going to lose to film. No, theater's still here, and that our best insight into Grecian society, whether it's Athenian, Spartan, however you'd like to look at it, our best insight into it is through the arts that remain, through the plays that we found from Sophocles, from Aeschylus, and Euripides as well. Like you see these and you realize that is the greatest thing, is that the arts of a society are the best and greatest testament to what that society was and what heights it reached. Science and mathematics, those are just truths. That's it. They are facts. They give no insight into the soul of a society. It's the arts, it's the fashion, it's the pottery, it's our artwork, the actual physical manifestation of art, and the plays, the scripts. They've been around forever, and that's the one thing that if I can contribute at the very least some small piece of the puzzle that is our modern day for future generations to look at and to study, that to me then means that I've done my job as an artist, and that's a life well lived. I would hope.
Yeah, that reminds me of another French philosopher, Simone Weil, that lived around the same time as Camus, and what she had something to say that what you said just reminded me of, like that the mathematics and the sciences, they're perfect, and there's no personality in perfection, but it's
Yes.
only in imperfection that we become
Yes.
and the characters in your play, it's because they're
Yeah.
imperfect that they're beautiful. And if they were
Yeah.
perfect, then there would be really no play. It'd be like
Yeah.
a math or
Yeah.
a science. So
Yeah.
I think that's really true, that the plays, it's because of their imperfections, not in spite of them,
Absolutely.
that they become the legacy of modernity.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But because the imperfections tell their own story. The imperfections lead us down a spiral of getting more and more insight into stuff. When something is perfect, it is just perfect. That's it. There's nothing more, nothing less to it. One cannot add or remove from it. But when you see an imperfection, well, what happened here? We are so obsessed early on with, why is the Sphinx's nose missing? No one's looking at the architectural marvel that is the Sphinx. They're looking at the fact that the nose is gone. what happened to the nose? That's the thing that people focus in on, and that's the stuff that one thinks about. And to me, it's because it's the avenue and it's the vehicle for more story. We are hungry for stories. We want to know something interesting. We want to feel like we're a part of something, or that we've been given insight into a mystery that gets unraveled. And that can only be unraveled through the imperfections of the individual, because the imperfections give more insight into what kind of world they lived in, that these imperfections should emerge, that these flaws should happen. Yeah, no, the imperfections are far more vastly interesting to me than anything that one would consider perfect. Who needs a flawless diamond when you can ask yourself, well, what happened here that it shipped? Um, Let me ask, and then we keep going. The story ends at perfection. The story continues when we're imperfect, because that's really what we're trying to strive for, is this perfect view of things. And honestly, that they achieve some semblance of that in the end. Of course, the play had to end right then and there. We can't go into their lives. Um, yeah. So yeah, that's how I see it. Imperfection is so much more interesting than perfection.
Yeah, we could chat forever, Frankie. We've chatted just over an hour now, but why don't you close off by telling the people that are and thank you everyone for watching this. But why don't you close off, Frankie, by telling a little bit about the upcoming production with Urbanite, because that's a huge deal, and
Yeah,
then we'll close off with that piece of
yeah.
tremendous news.
Yeah. That Must Be the Entrance to Heaven will be opening up with Urbanite Theater next June. And it will be running through July. I believe it's June 9th through July 9th, if I'm remembering correctly, or something like the 11th or something like that. But it is going to be running from June through July, and it is going to be opening at the Urbanite Theater in Sarasota, Florida. They originally commissioned the play, and I used that opportunity, that commission, and that money, and the time that it afforded me, to merge the ideas of that black hole boxing, Latino issues, and risk into one wonderful amalgamation of ideas. So it's going to be going up. We're still looking for some of the actors. It's a process, and we're also looking to find the director, and hopefully we'll get that very soon. But I'm hoping that it's the beginning of a very long, wonderful life for this play. One of the things that, in winning this award, what I want this play to do, what I want it to accomplish, much like any champion, is that it lives up to the stature of the championship that it's received. And to me, nothing would make me happier than for it to be able to bear on a publication, winner of the Risk Theater Modern Tragedy competition in many different productions as it goes, and people start looking into it and start reading about Risk and start finding out about Risk itself. So that to me would be the greatest potential scenario, honestly. So now that it's getting this production, I hope that it gets the word of Risk out there. I want to make sure that it's in the program. I want to make sure that it's on the publishing for people to see. And then beyond that, I want them to see, yes, this model of theater is something that is moving. It is something that is theatrically viable, and something that audiences will be very interested in seeing live on stage. So that is really the biggest thing for me, is that this play will be able to not only validate Risk Theater, but validate Urbanite's investment into the play, and validate what everyone has given to me in order to get this play to this level. And I hope that this play can continue to give that, like a plant, that it flowers and provides lots of fruit. That will be to the benefit of everyone that took the time and said, yes, this play is worthy. Yes, this play um, has merit. And yeah, so that's really it for me. I'm hoping that this play lives up to the wonderful tradition that you and the many jurors that have passed through Risk Theater have set, and to the wonderful, almost decade long series of productions that Urbanite has created, that have been very successful throughout their entire list of seasons. So yeah, that's what I'd love everyone to come away with.
I love it. It's like a title defense.
Yeah.
Each time it comes on the theater, it's gotta yeah, it's gotta overcome the odds all over again.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it has to show itself. It has to prove itself worthy. It has to prove itself relevant. And it has to prove itself ready to meet the task. Yeah.
And then also for you, it's like it's almost like a title defense too. Like each play
Yeah.
that you write to create your oeuvre, like
Mhm.
you're gonna have to there must be the burden of you gotta like
Oh yeah,
you gotta
always.
like overcome like what you've
Yeah.
already achieved to take it to the next higher
Yeah.
level.
Yeah. Oh,
So
absolutely. Absolutely. Especially as I become more relentless in my self-interrogation, because all of my plays that are worth a damn are just an interrogation of myself. I have to dig at deeper truths every single time. Or else what am I doing really? If I'm not trying to go deeper, am I really doing anything at all? Of course, I would warn every playwright, see a therapist, make
yeah,
sure that you're taking care of yourself.
yeah.
But it is one of those things that I hold very much as a kind of responsibility, that as a playwright, I want to make sure that I do right by my plays, that I give them the best opportunity and the best odds to be successful. And the only way to do that is by giving the most of myself possible to make sure that these plays are the most viable possible. Um, yeah, that to me is so very important. And it is very much like a title defense. There was a while where I had only written really one great play that was getting everything, and nothing else was really hitting. And then this boxing play came in, and it was this kind of affirmation. All right, I still got it. And then the next play hopefully will be another further affirmation. And before the boxing play, in between the prisoner play, was Paletas de Coco, that solo show. And it's always this kind of let me see if I can still maintain. Let me see if my mental athleticism is still there, and keep on going. I think that there will come a time where, um, just like anyone, you don't want to overstay your welcome, and I don't want to overstay my welcome in the presence of the muses. I'll just need to know and figure out when it's time to hang up the gloves and retire. I hope that's not for a long time. I hope that my mental acuity is there for years and years to come. But yeah, I just hope and pray it holds.
Yeah, and just chatting with you, I think people that have heard what you had to say in this interview, lots of people are going to be rooting for you ringside in this defense, and
Hey,
you're going to inspire people to. I think your words have the power to inspire people to that have listened to the interview to take it to the next level themselves. But with that, I think we'll sign off here. I'm Edwin.
I'm Frankie.
And we hope, thanks everyone for tuning in, and we hope you've enjoyed and are able to take away something from this interview to take you to the next step in your own world heavyweight title defense. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.